Africa's e-commerce sector stands at a crossroad, caught between the protective walls of new international tariffs and the expansive promise of a borderless African digital market. Hello, you're watching Small Biz Evolution, and this week I'm joined by Chief Economist at AGOA Capital, Frederick Mitchell, to help us understand the current e-commerce and trade climate in South Africa. Frederick, thank you so much for joining us. You've warned about a diplomatic chill impacting trade. With the US 30% tariffs now that have come into play with regards to trade and exports, which specific South African e-commerce industries are most at risk in terms of losing that American customer?
It's difficult to say at this stage, to be honest, because we don't know. It's difficult to say quantify the magnitude of, let's say, e-services being sold into the US from South African companies, and it's very easy to, let's say, offshore South African services to another country in terms of rerouted, let's say, via the UK or Europe to the US. So I guess there's routes around that specifically because it's not specifically related to physical goods and services being rendered, or let's say small services being rendered, but services are harder to quantify than, let's say, actual products that leave South African shores and going to the US.
And as we look past the 2025 AGOA expiration or renewal cycle, what is your bear case for South Africa's economy if we fail to actually fix that relationship with the US? That's,
I guess, in some certain sense, for me as an economist, that's very detrimental, to say the least, because we know we talked about the African Free Trade Agreement, we talk about realigning towards BRICS countries, looking to the east, but some of the products that we export to the US markets are specifically related to high-end consumer goods, which is consumed within the US. Now, the east, if you look at, let's say, China and countries around them, they produce goods themselves and they want to export. So they don't want to take our exports in their markets because they are exporting to us. So it's like, who's going to take our products that we produce that's high-end in, let's say, Africa? The demand in Africa and in the rest of the world won't be there to let's say, stave off what's going to happen if we don't get access or a renewal of AGOA going forward.
We talk a lot about that 1 trillion export opportunity in Africa. From a private equity perspective at AGOA, which digital trade infrastructure are bankable right now?
I guess we're looking into the fintech spaces. I guess there's always space for cross-border payments, moving money around and getting payments done. I guess that's the space where Africa is in the moment, getting funds to move across much easier, and that's the market that's quite most ripe for the taking or expansion at this stage.
You've actually spoken or mentioned that South Africa needs to move away from relying on a single trade partner and rather diversify. I'd like us to look at, is it better for e-commerce businesses to move towards Eastern or Global South countries? Is that a viable replacement for the US? Because, I mean, like, the US is investing a lot in South Africa.
It's really, let's say, a double-edged sword at this stage, because you want to have access in the US from South Africa's point of view, because we want the money that we earn in, let's say, the US to be spent in South Africa or repatriated back to South Africa. And rewriting it, say, via a different country will leave some of that proceeds in that country. So it's a bit of both. It's good. Yes, we can get our products in, but it's not as favorable as wanted when you can do it directly from South Africa that we really need. We need the money and the flow of funds in our market and coming back to us, and so we can get the advantage of it as a country.
So Frederick, if you are advising a South African e-commerce SME today that relies on international sourcing, what would you say is the transition that they need to do now in order to survive this trade volatility in the next 24 months?
I guess there will always be trade volatility in international trading, especially if you look at the Davos, what's happening, and we're seeing the rules-based order now being changing and new lines are being drawn. So I guess you will have to see how the countries align and see how the sourcing of goods and services that you need to produce is going to be affected by, let's say, the new lines that's being drawn in the sand going forward, let's say, for the next 24 months at least.
Frederick, always valuable to have your insights on the show. Thank you so much for joining us once more.
Thank you so much.
That was AGOA Capital's Chief Economist, Frederick Mitchell, dissecting South Africa's future in trade and e-commerce. Stay tuned for more business programming after this.